In this video, I'll demonstrate how to label lines and the different labeling options in Microsurvey CAD. The labeling is controlled by your labeling defaults, which can be found in the MS Annotate ribbon, and under your defaults group, you'll find your labeling defaults. So all your labeling is controlled from within this dialog group for your settings, and you have the option to create different styles with different settings. So you can change your Leroy size, the style name, the layer name, and the color for your labels there. And you can also add in text offsets and angles for the labels there if you like. That's all controlled from within this labeling defaults feature. So I'm just going to hit cancel to get out of that. And under our labels group, you'll find our label line options. So if I just click on this for the pull down, you can see that we have many different options and different formats for labeling lines with different information depending on what you're wanting to use. The most common is the auto bearing / distance, and if we look to the icon here, it actually gives us a preview of what the format looks like. So it'll have the bearing on top, and then it'll have your line, and then it'll have the distance underneath. So I'll just click on that, and I want to label this line, and I'll hit enter, and it will prompt me with an arrow letting me know which line I am currently working with, and it'll ask what side you want the bearing label placed. So you have the option to place the bearing label on top or underneath the line, and we also have the option to set the direction of the bearing. So if we want the bearing label to be shown from 182 to 175, then we can hit to the right side of this line, or the arrow, sorry. And if you want the inverse of that bearing, then you would just hit to the left of the line. But in this case, I want the bearing to be placed on top, and I want the direction from 182 to 175. So I'll just click, and it has placed my label on top and has given me the bearing direction from 182 to 175 with my distance, and I'll just hit escape, and I'll just relabel this line again with the same format, and I'll hit enter, and this time I want the bearing label placed underneath, and I'd like my direction to be swapped. So I'll just click underneath and to the left, and you can see that is now re-updated with the bearing label placed underneath with the inverse direction and the distance on top. So we just hit escape, and because this line has points associated to it, that makes these labels smart, meaning that if I perform any edits to my points here, the labels will get updated with the new information of the line. So I'm just going to prompt a move for 175, and since my grips are on, I can just do an easy grip edit. So I'll click on the point here, and I'll move it down over here. And because my point protection is turned on, it'll let me know that I am moving point 175, and it gives me the northing and easting of the shift here. I'll just hit accept. And you can see that once I have accepted the move, it has updated with the new line information, and also the new distance label also gets updated. And I'll just zoom out. And I'll just go back into our label line options. And as you can see with the different options, I'm just going to quickly go over a couple of the key ones that are normally used. So we have our auto bearing distance. As you can see, it places the bearing and the distance label on the same line beside each other, as you can see from the example. Next, we have our auto split bearing option, and that will split up the degrees, minutes, and seconds of the bearing labels. If you have, for example, we have a couple lots here with different lines or different distances for the lots there, but the bearing is all one bearing for each lot. So that is an example of where you would want to use a split bearing. We also have the auto bearing offline. So you can see sometimes the label will be too short of a distance for the label to be shown nice and neatly. So it's nice to have the option to place the bearing off the line and just use a leader pointing for that bearing label. And we also have the auto distance bearing format, which places the distance on top with the bearing on the bottom of that line. And we also have at the bottom here manual entries. So for manual bearing, for example, I'll select on the line that I want to label. I'll hit enter, and it'll ask what side I want the bearing placed. I want it on the left side. And next it prompts you to manually input the bearing or azimuth of that line. So we'll just put 0 degrees, 10 seconds, or 10 minutes, and 12 seconds. I'll hit enter, and you can see that it has now inserted the bearing label with the manual entry that I have just input. And that is how you label lines and the different labeling options in Microsurvey CAD. Thanks for taking interest in this video.